Hi there, this is Unmesh from PiXimperfect, and I only hope that you, my friend, are having a great day, and if not, I'm sure that you are doing your best to make it an awesome one. Back with another different kind of video, and in this video we're going to compare two versions, one legendary, one latest. If you look at the system requirements of both these versions side by side, you would notice how far we have come, except of course the internet connection requirements. You know what I'm talking about. As you guessed it right, today we're going to compare two versions of Photoshop. On one side we have the legendary Photoshop CS6 that a lot of people like to hold on to, and on one side we have the latest and hopefully the greatest 2021. Now, some of you might say, Unmesh, how unfair a comparison is this? You cannot compare versions which are 7 years apart. Yes, you heard it right. The last 2 years don't count. But look at it this way. To this date, if you go to a photo studio, you will find many of them still using Photoshop CS6. Many photographers and digital artists as well are still holding on to their copies of CS6. Some like it because they don't like the idea of Adobe renting their software instead of letting the users own it. And for some, CS6 is more stable and they don't really need the bells and whistles. In this video, let's take a look at how far we have come, or have we actually taken a step back from what Photoshop actually used to be. Let's find out. So without any further ado, I'm super excited for you. Let's get started. Back in the contradictory world of Photoshop, and this video is divided into 4 sections. First, we're going to talk about Adobe's offerings. So what does Adobe offer in each of these versions? What are the add-ons? What are the benefits you get? All right. Then we're going to talk about features. Now, there are more than 20-30 features that were added after CS6. We might not be able to talk about all of them, but we'll talk about most of the essential ones. Then we're going to follow that by something that is equally essential. We always look at the feature and just ignore the rest. And that is compatibility. Is the older version that compatible, or there are problems with the newer version? We're going to talk about that. And then most importantly, we're going to talk about performance. So get yourself a cup of coffee or tea or popcorn or pizza, whatever that suits you, or cola, and let's get into it. Let's begin with Adobe's offerings, and the very first obvious difference between both of these versions are subscription-based payment and one-time fee. If you wanted to buy Photoshop CS6, you would pay the money, buy the software, and that will be for you forever. The demerit here is that you won't be able to upgrade, and if you wanted to upgrade, you would have to pay more, and that happened with the earlier versions of Photoshop. Of course, after CS6, it was CC, and now we have a subscription-based payment model. So with 2021 and after CC, now, if you want to own Photoshop, you cannot own it. You can only rent it. You have to pay a monthly fee for it, and as soon as you stop paying the monthly fee or the annual fee, you will lose access to Photoshop. But the advantage here is that as long as you keep paying monthly, you continue to get updates and new versions and new features, so on and so forth, the usual. The second one is, if you get Photoshop with the photography plan or the all apps plan, you do get some cloud storage. You can choose how much cloud storage you want. You can buy additional cloud storage, but it is on the table for you to use. With the introduction of Creative Cloud, for every creative Adobe application, you get access to something called libraries. So libraries not just exist in Photoshop, they also exist in Premiere Pro, Adobe Illustrator. You get the point. So library is nothing but a library of your assets that are stored in the cloud. So you can get access to any asset that is stored in your library from any Adobe application across any device once you log into your Adobe account. It can be gradients, graphics, colors, text, styles, and many other things. There's also a way to store a group of layers, and if you want to know how, to watch this video. So let's say I have some groups. So royal blue is what I would like to apply to this image. So all I have to do is to right click on it and choose place layers, and have a look. Some color grading on it. Now let's decrease the opacity to 50% and everything can be edited. Have a look. All of these adjustment layers are still intact. I can go in and work on it. So that is the advantage of libraries. You can store your branding creative assets here as well. So if I wanted to place my logo, all I have to do is to just drag it and drop it, and it would be done. It's also connected to Adobe Stock. So it's an all-in-one place to get access to your creative assets from inside of Adobe applications. And again, if you are on the photography plan, which gives you Photoshop and Lightroom, both of these, if you buy Photoshop separately, it's going to be more expensive than buying the photography plan. So that is one advantage there, that you also get Lightroom. If you wanted to buy Lightroom earlier, you would have to pay separately. Anyway, besides that, you also get access to Adobe Portfolio, where you can host your portfolio. You get access to the vast library of Adobe fonts that you can use in your projects. And finally, you also get access to Adobe Spark. And the last thing is that at the moment, you just cannot buy CS6. Adobe doesn't offer CS6 for purchase. You can only get CS6 if you can buy maybe a second-hand copy from somebody else. So that is the only way to get it, or if you have an old copy, that's the only way you're going to get access to it. Well, legally, of course. Coming to the most fun part of the video, and that is the features. And let's start with something that I feel has been a huge leap from Photoshop CS6. And this is something that is actually useful, and that is the advancement in selection features. Starting with select subject, it has gotten so much better that if you just click on it once, it also tries to select the hair perfectly. It might not get it absolutely right, but this is pretty darn incredible. So let's create a mask out of this, and if you put a white background in the background, you will notice the selection. Have a look. Isn't that a pretty good selection? Now you also have a complete selected mask workspace with every tool and every slider right here dedicated to making a perfect selection. So let's say I want to shift the edge a little bit to the left. All I have to do is to shift it to the left. Also, you can go ahead and add some feather to it. Have a look. The edge is getting better, and you can just improve the selection. The quick selection is right here, the refining is right here, the regular brush is right here. So it's a whole workspace dedicated just for selection and masking. Although select subject automatically tries to create a mask out of this, it might not be perfect, especially with hair and fur sometimes. So you can just click on refine hair, which is a new feature, and it automatically tries to get the hair perfectly. If it doesn't, you can always get the refine edge brush tool and just paint over the edge to get the hair in. You can also improve it with the quick selection tool to add more areas to it, and you get the gist of it. In Photoshop CS6, as you can clearly tell, especially in Windows, it has a scaling issue. Right now, the display is set to 1080p, not even 4K. In 4K, it gets so tiny, you have to squint your eyes to see what the text says, maybe with a magnifying glass. So that is the reason this video is only available in 1080p. So CS6 only has the quick selection tool at best. You can try it, and if you want to get the hair in, you would have to go to select and then refine edge. And with the refine edge brush tool, start painting over the hair areas to get them back. It might not be perfect, and also it might get a lot of the background, but this is the way that you have with Photoshop CS6. There's no select subject, there's no automatic selection, none of that. So this is what you have to do manually, but it's also pretty good. If you look at it, it's not bad. With Photoshop 2021, you definitely get new features like sky replacement, which automatically detects the sky and replaces it for you. And you can also match the color of the sky with the foreground, make some adjustments, the lighting adjustment and the color adjustment accordingly, according to your choice. The other feature regarding the sky is sky selection. So if you go to select, you would notice there's a sky option right there. And as you have guessed it, these features are non-existent with CS6. With CS6, you do get drop shadow. It has been there in Photoshop for a very long time. However, what you do not get is multiple drop shadows. So if I double click on the right hand side of the layer and open up layer styles, have a look. I can add as many drop shadows as I want. I already have 4 right over here, and I can just keep adding drop shadow after drop shadow, and I can have them at different locations or different distances. So I can have one shadow right here, I can have the other shadow somewhere else with different settings, with different colors, infinite possibilities. Back with CS6, and notice that this layer is a smart object. Now if we go to filter, have a look, liquify is grayed out. You cannot even apply field blur, iris blur or tilt shift on smart objects. However, with 2021, you of course can. Similarly, we have a smart object right here, and have a look. We can apply liquify, we can apply iris blur, field blur, tilt shift, and all of that. Now we also have blend mode previews, which CS6 doesn't have. So here we have a gradient, and we can just scroll through different blend modes and it'll give you a preview of how each blend mode is gonna look for you. Another feature useful for design that CS6 doesn't have is that if you select the text tool, choose the font and size of your choice, and even if you create a text box, it will fill it with sample text for you. This is absolutely helpful for you to figure out what properties you would want to change. For example, whether you want a different font or maybe a different size. It makes super easy for you to figure out even before typing the actual text. Similarly, you can just click on in here. Doesn't have to be a text box. You also get a sample text. And now you can scroll through different fonts to see which one suits you the best and then change the text. Another extremely valuable feature which CS6 doesn't have, and that is Camera Raw as a filter. Now, whenever you open a raw photo in Photoshop CS6, you can probably get access to Camera Raw. But what if you want to apply it to any image or at a certain point in your workflow? What if you want to get access to those shadows and highlight sliders? How would you get that? You don't want a workaround to kind of open a JPEG in Camera Raw when you first open it. None of that jazz. If you want to apply Camera Raw as a filter, you won't get it in CS6, but the later versions. Let's say I was working with this image, all right? I worked hard to kind of remove the shadows from the face. I did some blemish removal. Now I feel like I need Camera Raw to kind of increase the contrast a little bit just on the face. So I can go to Filter and then Camera Raw Filter. This does not exist in CS6, and in here you can increase the contrast, maybe change the highlights and shadows. I can just mask it and keep it only on the face, and for different areas I can have different Camera Raw filters. There's so much flexibility. Another feature that does not exist in CS6, and that is brush stroke smoothing. So have a look. Right now this is a simple brush stroke made by a Wacom tablet. If I try to make the same thing with my mouse, this will become absolutely difficult. So right in here, even if you're new to Wacom tablet, this can be useful. Or if you want smooth lines, this is useful. So you can just increase the smoothing. It's going to assist you with painting. So right now, even if I am on the mouse and I am drawing lines, it will help me to get smoother lines. You see that? You can draw smooth lines just with the mouse. Isn't that pretty great? If there was no smoothing, making it would be absolutely difficult. Speaking of brushes, you also have symmetry painting with Photoshop 2021. That means that you can choose a symmetry like a simple vertical symmetry. You can also create your own symmetry and then start painting. It will be painted on the other side as well. Or you can choose a more complicated symmetry like a mandala. Let's go for 5 and let's adjust its size. And when you start painting, have a look. It's like a kaleidoscope in there. Pretty cool, isn't it? Back to CS6, and let's say we wanted to remove all this, so we made a selection around it. Now, we can definitely apply a content-aware fill. But with 2021, the content-aware fill is a little more advanced. Let's take a look at what CS6 does. With CS6, you have to go to Edit and Fill and simply choose Content-Aware right there, hit OK. Now, although it does do an impressive job, it doesn't give you a lot of other options as to where to sample from and how to fill those areas and different parameters to play with. Also, it messed up this area, so you would have to apply it here again. And it worked this time, not too shabby. With Photoshop 2021, you do get a dedicated content-aware fill dialog box. Here you can change a lot of settings. You can choose how the color adaptation goes. You can choose whether it needs rotation or not, scaling and mirroring. Lots of parameters to choose from. But the most important thing here is that you can choose where to sample from. So these green areas are the areas where Photoshop is right now sampling from, and by default, it has done an amazing job. So if there was a messed up area, you would say, hey, Photoshop, don't sample the laptop. So you can remove that area and it won't sample that area and it will modify that. And you can also output this replaced area on a new layer. So you can hit OK and those replaced areas would be on a completely new layer, thus allowing you to be more non-destructive. With 2021, you have another new tool when it comes to selections, and that is the object selection tool. Let's say you want to select a particular object, like only this spot, so you can make a rectangle or a lasso selection around it. You don't have to be accurate. Photoshop will do everything automatically. If you wanted to select this object, make a rectangle around it, done. Another little bit convenient feature that was added after CS6 was zooming in to layer content. Let's say I want to work with this logo, I want to zoom in on it. So all we have to do is to hold the Alt key or the Option key and click on that logo layer, and we automatically zoom into the content of just that layer. With Photoshop 2021, we have a little more advanced lens blur. Now I already have an alpha channel right here created based on the depth. So let's go to Filter, Blur, and then Lens Blur. So if I wanted to focus on this person, all I have to do is to just click on him. If I wanted to focus on the foreground, just click on it. If I wanted to focus on the background, just click on that area and automatically those areas would be in focus. Right now we are in CS6. We can also do the same thing here. We can focus on the person, the foreground, or the background. However, have a look at the blur quality. There's a night and day difference between both of these. Let's say you were painting with a particular style of brush and you want to erase the same thing with the same settings and the same brush. How do you do it? Well, just hold the tilde key in the later versions of Photoshop. Tilde key is the key next to one on the left of one, and it will be erased with the same brush and the same settings. Isn't that pretty useful? As soon as you let go of the tilde key, you can paint again. Just hold the tilde key, erase, let go of the tilde key, and you can paint again. So it's a very convenient feature that CS6 doesn't have. Remember this composite we did a couple tutorials ago? If you haven't watched it, do watch it right over here. So in here we do have a subject layer, and we have made a lot of adjustments to this layer to match the color of the subject with that of the background and also the lighting. What if we didn't want it so complicated? We would group all of this into a smart object by selecting the subject layer, holding the shift key, selecting the topmost layer which is related to the subject, right click on it, and then choose convert to smart object. Now, what if you wanted to go back and adjust the settings of these adjustment layers? We would have to double click on the layer thumbnail and adjust it right over here. But what if we wanted the layers back? There's no easy way. You would have to go back to that document, copy the layers, bring it right over here, adjust the size, probably, maybe sometime. It can be very complicated. But with the later versions of Photoshop, all you have to do is to right click on it and then choose convert to layers. And you automatically get all of the layers back. They all are grouped. Now, if you want to ungroup it, you can do that by right-clicking on it and choosing Ungroup Layers. Back in CS6, we have done the same thing. We have grouped all of them into a smart object. And if I double-click on the thumbnail, hit OK, I get access to all of these layers. I would have to make changes here, save it, and then get back to it. But there is no option in CS6 to right-click on it and then choose Convert to Layers. Let's say you opened a ton of images and documents, but in the end, you decided to work on only this one, and you want to close all the others. Earlier in CS6, you would have to just manually close all the others, but right now, there's an option for it. You can have the document that you're working on open and have others closed automatically by going to File and choosing Close Others. Everything else is closed. With Photoshop 2021, you also have neural filters, which are Adobe's AI filters. But to be honest, most of them don't really have a practical use, and the ones that do have a potential for practical use pretty much needs a lot of improvements. Another extremely important feature is pattern preview. It gives you a real-time preview as you create a pattern of how a particular pattern is going to look, whether it's going to be continuous, and you can also paint on any area of the image to make it continuous. And as usual, CS6 does not have pattern preview, and you might have to find a workaround to check how the pattern would look. The next feature with 2021, which CS6 doesn't have and that I wanted for years, was resetting smart objects. Let's say we have this logo, which is a smart object. If I press Ctrl or Command T, and now we squished it, stretched it, and if we also warp it, let's warp it a little bit, and this is what we applied, right? Let's say we want to reset it. With later versions of Photoshop, and this is not available in CS6, you can right-click on the layer and then choose Reset Transform, and you get it all back. There are so many more features that were added after CS6 that if I begin to include each and every one of them, this video can get super long, almost 3 times than the current time duration. I have written some down for you. We have live shapes, the ability to search brushes and presets. We have more professional brushes. So with CS6, we didn't have as much brushes and presets that it already comes with. However, with the later versions of Photoshop, we have many more options built into it. We have match font feature. Obviously, through that, we also have the access to Adobe fonts and also many more. Many of these other features are just little changes and tweaks that were made to Photoshop. Now let's compare both the versions in terms of compatibility. If it's not obvious already, you already know that whatever new plugins or new panels or extensions that are coming might not be supported with the earlier versions of Photoshop like CS6. For example, I recently did a video about Lumenzia. It's a great extension. Check out this video. So if you scroll down at the product page, you would notice that there's a note for CS6 users that some features might work differently or might be limited, of course. And this will continue to happen with new plugins and extensions, and there are many of these which are not even compatible with CS6. The second one is, it might be a challenge to work with CS6 on newer operating systems as there are no updates on it. For instance, even with my Windows 10, there's a scaling issue. This is how the screen looks in 4K. I don't know how compatible it would be with MacBooks or maybe with the newer M1s, but there is a possibility that there might be some friction. And finally, this is an absolute given. If you create an action in the later versions of Photoshop, let's say in the action, we have an action for select subject. It just won't work with CS6, right? Because CS6 doesn't just simply have select subject. So if you were buying newer actions, they might not be compatible with your CS6. Just check the product details there, which Photoshop versions are these actions compatible with. Now, this is interesting. Let's come to performance. I compared the startup time of both Photoshop CS6 and 2021, and surprisingly, Photoshop 2021 took 15 seconds to start, CS6 took about 4 seconds to start. Similarly, when I applied the same process, in this case I applied an iris blur, it took 24.95 seconds in CS6, while with 2021 it took 59.9 seconds. Not one PiXimperfect tutorial goes by without the discussion of curves. So in here, if you work with the curves, there's a little bit of laggy movement. It's not actually laggy, but it's not as smooth. Let me show you what I mean. Back in CS6, and here if I add curves, and let me move the curves for you. Look how smooth this thing is. After watching this video, I leave it for you to decide whether a Photoshop upgrade of a subscription-based system over a perpetual license system is worth it or not. I think that if we can overlook the scaling issues with Windows 10, or maybe there's a workaround to fix it, either way, if we can overlook that, feature for feature, CS6 might seem more stable and faster for the exact same features. But 2021 makes up for those by adding new features. If you don't want those features, and if you can overlook the scaling issues, if it works for you, maybe you don't have to upgrade. Either way, compatibility will soon be an issue for you if it isn't already, because these versions are almost a decade apart and you will be forced to switch anyway. The question here is whether you are switching in the Adobe ecosystem or outside of it. That's an interesting thing to find out. Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to give us a like, and also don't forget to subscribe, and not just subscribe. Ring the bell so that you, my friend, don't miss any other future tips, tricks or tutorials. I would like to thank all of these nice people for supporting this channel on Patreon and helping keep PiXimperfect free for everybody forever. Thanks to their support for making this video possible. And thanks to you for your time. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.